Good afternoon. My name is Tokiwa Smith, and I want to welcome you to our Chat and Chew workshop. So, the Chat and Chew workshop is a program of Tokiwa T. Smith Consulting, where we take an opportunity to discuss issues that are either racial inequities or systematic racism in education and philanthropy. And so, this quarter's topic, and I'm so excited about our guest because she's just amazing, is focusing on out of school time STEM programs. And so I'm a chemical engineer. And one of the things that I have noticed is that Black families aren't always aware of programs, whether, they just don't know. They just find out after. Organizers who organize them claim they don't know how to reach Black families, which I don't understand that reasoning either. But it is important and a critical step, although it's not necessary, but it is definitely critical in, child's STEM career aspiration to participate in these programs because it allows them to be exposed and make decisions prior to going on a college campus if STEM is really for them. And so they're a wonderful opportunity to learn more than what they learn in their classroom. Most of the time, if you have a really good program, it is run by a STEM professional or a STEM professional that has moved into outreach, and it can be a great opportunity in your child's preparation for college and career in STEM. And so we wanted to make time for having this conversation for families to know what to do and to have conversations about realistically what are the barriers, because our speaker, Dr. Dukes, and I are both Black women STEM professionals that have gone into STEM education and outreach. And so we do understand that these programs are available and we want to see children that look like us in these programs. So welcome again, Dr. Dukes, and thank you so much for making time to serve as our Chat and Chew speaker for today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me and the invitation to speak about this issue. It's very dear to me as well.
And so Dr. Dukes has an extensive bio, so we're not going to read her bio, but we're going to have her share a little bit about herself so you can kind of know why she is the expert in this topic and chosen for the discussion. So Dr. Dukes, can you tell us a little bit about your background, career path, and your current role?
Sure. So I'm originally from Georgia, so I'm a Georgia native. I went to Spelman College for undergrad and majored in chemistry, so I'm also a chemist. Moved on into graduate school and completed my PhD in chemistry at Tufts University. And then from there, thought about where I wanted to be. I have done an extensive amount of volunteering and coordination and volunteer work while I was in graduate school and undergrad, and found this amazing opportunity to be a science educator and communicator at MIT post graduate school. From there, I had an opportunity to do a fellowship at the National Science Foundation, and I'm now director of K-12 programs at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, where I work with our scientists to develop curriculum that is based on the research that's being conducted there. Berkeley Lab is one of 17 Department of Energy funded national laboratories, and I also go out to the local community and talk with local districts, organizations, and community members about how we can get more connected. We end up with a very robust number of high school programs that we bring in students for every year to get work-based learning experiences that we're talking about today in STEM. So that is my day-to-day job right now.
And it's such an amazing position. Berkeley Lab is such a wonderful, unique place. And I also think it's really, really great that they have that role because I'm a firm believer that children need to see STEM professionals. And although we know not all the professionals that you expose them to look like them, but at least they can see it. And that's a start, whether it's not meeting anyone at all. And so My next question is, did you participate in any out of school time STEM programs while growing up that sparked your interest in STEM and or allowed you to engage in activities and or learn things that you didn't learn in school?
Sure. So two-parter. I am fortunate to have had a mother who's a math teacher and aunts who were science teachers. So math and science weren't things that were foreign to my household. And I was actually encouraged and, supposed to be good at math, supposed to be good at science, which I know a lot of students don't have right from the start. So I was fortunate in that way that I loved math, I loved science, and so I excelled in those things in school. And I had the opportunity to take part in what's called NASA Sharp Plus when I was in high school, where if you live 50 plus miles away from a NASA site, you actually go to a university for 8 weeks. So I flew to the University of Michigan. I got to work in a research laboratory for 8 weeks when I was 17 and really see what it meant to be a researcher. And that's something that was much, much different from being a part of, say, my chemistry class. I was actually going to a laboratory, meeting with other graduate students and professors and having them discuss with me what it meant to be in graduate school, what it meant to do research. So that really solidified, what I was going to major in and what I was going to pursue once I finished high school. And I also kind of map out the programming that I do now based on my experience that I had, way back then. So that was a really fortunate opportunity that our government agencies, supported and made available for students.
That sounds great. And what I feel is common in my story, even though I did not take advantage of the opportunities for STEM programming, is that encouragement from a little girl. I've always loved math and science, and I was never told I couldn't do it. And so even, the program takes it up another notch, but even that environment where you felt that it was comfortable, it was normal, it wasn't strange, for you to be able to excel at C in math and science and explore that interest. And so, unlike you, my family was not STEM professionals. I had an aunt that was a microbiologist, and I didn't know that until I was grown. But I do have this vivid memory of us being like somewhere where it was a salad bar, and she shut the salad bar down. And I was so embarrassed, but not realizing my aunt was a microbiologist with the FDA. She was saving all of our lives because there was something wrong with that temperature. But just knowing, even whether you're a STEM professional or not, that how important it is for you to create an environment where your children feel comfortable in excelling and liking science. And then you can build from there, right? Starting with the programs.
Yeah.
That's good.
I just like to add, you touched on a great topic of, I think sometimes, as parents or adults in children's lives, we sometimes go, oh, I'm not a science person. Oh, I'm bad at math. Oh, I can't do that. And I've noticed, especially when I worked in a museum, I would have mothers come in and say, oh, you do the activity. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to sit in the corner. And so that instills a thing of like, if you have young sons, oh, my mom can't do math or can't do engineering. So why am I going to trust another young woman in my class to partner with to do math or engineering? And so I think instilling at a young age that like you are also game to build this, erector set. You are also game to try this math problem out or try this like engineering or coding activity. Just even trying, that is still very influential. Like, again, my aunts or my mom never said, oh, I'm bad at math. They were actually people who were, experts or, teaching math. So there would never be a conversation at any point in time where we were saying, oh, I'm bad at this specific subject, even if, I might have gone past, what they have been doing as, middle and high school teachers.
Mm-hmm. And I also think it creates, we talk about as parents and adults in children's lives, creating memories with them, right? And so it provides a great opportunity for you to have this great memory with your child and the children in your life, and they feel supported, right? Like the adult, my mom, my auntie, my godmom, the play aunties, the village that is raising me, is excited and supporting me in this thing that I'm interested in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how would you define an out of school time STEM program?
That's great. So there, I would say, is a range of out of school STEM. So there's everything from your after school club that gives you an opportunity to learn and get excited about STEM activities. There are online programs that, again, teach training or have career talks that, again, continuously introduce you to opportunities in broad ranges. And I call that like awareness. So there are programs that provide awareness of where you can go, what you can do, what's out there. And then I say there are training programs that then give you the opportunity to learn more in a more fixed setting where you are actually getting a skill set, or you are getting the opportunity to have a hands-on experience that's more towards technical skill building. And finally, there's like the work base. So putting yourself, or out of school program, so an internship that will put you in the workspace. And so I think for students, it's important to get all of those steps where you're either getting awareness, you're learning about STEM, you're learning about STEM researchers, careers, and that might be a competition that you do, this technical skills training, say a FIRST robotics, where you're building a robot, where you're working in a classroom and learning about something, or again, in an internship program where you're actually getting to apply the skills that you've built up in your communication and technical skill building into those programs. So it's a full ecosystem, but out of school time STEM programs, again, a span from awareness to training to actually work-based learning opportunities.
And I'm going to add a question that's not on our question list, so apologize.
No
So
worries.
how early can children start these programs, or you would suggest they start participating?
Yeah, so I would suggest, I mean, you can start as early as you want. There are tons of like children's museums, science museums that may have a younger, maybe for a younger audience. And I say be mindful of what the opportunities are that are being offered and for what age range. You don't want to, I see sometimes parents like push their kids and are taking like the 7-year-old to a lecture. That's not actually like age appropriate for that student. Sometimes they are very, very smart and capable of understanding, but a 7-year-old typically wants to touch. They want to run around. They want to do stuff. And you're putting them in an hour-long public lecture. That doesn't seem like the greatest way to like really keep them energized about science. So finding those at a younger age, find those opportunities for them to tinker, for them to break stuff, put it back together, to learn about the world, to make observations, finding age appropriate activities to start with. Then again, middle school might be getting them into more clubs, activities, some competitions where they might be able to, again, learn as a team, work together. And then finally in high school, getting them actual job-based activities, things that are a little bit longer, a camp for a week or 2 weeks, or actually now by senior year, they should be actually applying to those programs that are 6 to 8 weeks long, getting opportunities to work directly with scientists. So it builds up as they go along. The only thing I say is, especially at the younger age, don't try to jump to that, like you should be building a rocket ship at 5. Which a lot of people want to jump to. And it's like, no, they should just be tearing apart a box and putting it back together, or getting Legos or something of that nature and starting there. And then because creativity is a big part of STEM, and I think we forget that. So allowing the creativity to really flourish and to break rules early so that they can then come back and understand why later on.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I remember doing exercises with the younger kids and just not realizing like their motor skills wasn't there. So it
Really?
just ended up trash on the floor. Like it was nothing. And I was
Mhm.
like, y'all want to go play? And it wasn't that, they couldn't get it intellectually.
Mhm.
6-year-olds can't cut well. And so,
They
the
really,
importance of
yeah.
crafting, what they can do with their intellectual and
Mhm.
physical capabilities, right?
Yeah. And like fourth and fifth grade, it's really hard to collaborate and compromise. So, like that comes like maybe sixth, seventh grade, you start to collaborate and be like, okay, I got this, you got this. Can we put it together? Fourth and fifth grade, it's actually still really hard to do that, to like just on a social level. So that's why I also talk about, again, being from working in a public institution, I would have parents that sometimes would try to fib about their kids' age and put them in something that was a little bit older. And it wasn't necessarily about the content, it was about the social skills that students needed to really be a part of that program. And to also make sure that the students who were of age were not babysitting those younger students. So really being mindful, I know, so really being mindful of where you are placing your child and picking the appropriate, age appropriate, socially appropriate programs so that they can actually thrive and they're not struggling or, getting in the way of anybody else who's, that age appropriate and supposed to be there.
I get it. So what are the benefits of participating in these programs during the academic year and or summer?
For the academic year, I think it just adds on to, they get a longer time to, work on a project, work together with people, to see different things happen across the course of the year. MESA is one of those great organizations that's across seven or eight states that has after school activities. They do projects, they do competitions, they really think about engineering design and how to support students in their love of STEM. So for academic year, I would say something like that, or a first robotics team or the science club. For the summertime, again, those camps really help build in those gaps of, hey, I didn't know you could do this if you study chemistry. I didn't know you could do this if you study biology. This is what, this type of scientist does. Those summer programs give those really great opportunities to have extended learning in a very different setting. So not going to school, you're going to have things that are not tests or, and you're going to be able to meet some like-minded students that you may know for the rest of your life and support you. So from that STEM program that I did when I was 17, I still talk to some of those people to this day, because we made really great bonds during that program. And we're able to talk to each other about like, what are you pursuing? What are you going to go into? And some of us ended up going to the same college. So there are tons of benefits from social, again, to understanding what you might choose in the future going forward.
And that's a great point that you made about the bonds that you're able to form, because you and I both know a part of successfully matriculating through a STEM program are your relationships. People talk about getting the good grades, understanding the content, but having a community of other people, the study groups. And so bringing up that point about the relationships and the bonds is super important, because I don't think as STEM community, we value that enough, right? To know that so much of our academic success, content success, professional success when you grow up is learning how to form bonds and build communities of support and learn how to work with colleagues and have good relationships. So you and I have met scientists. It's like you talking to people.
Yeah.
It's
I think,
awful. Like, oh.
yeah. Overall, and I'm mindful of that, bringing young people into those environments. So we're really careful about who we have as mentors, who we introduce them to. We want to make sure that they're ready to do all the training and everything. So as a scientific community, it kind of is like, it's very, sometimes can be ego driven, and who's the smartest in the room and who can excel. And even now for young people, it's very, very competitive. So, especially for young people who might end up being the only person in the room that looks like them from time to time, having that network of your peers, but also having that network of your support system. I think that is crucial to persevering. And so in some of these programs, you might meet some people that you don't go to school with, but you keep in contact with, just so that you can make sure that you are a part of this system that helps, and that will help you persevere. So I definitely, because I went to Spelman, I had a number of Black women who were going on to different STEM professions and going on to graduate school. So while we weren't at the same school, we were able to talk to each other about our experiences and when are your qualifiers coming up? When are your tests coming up? How can we support you? So it's always important to have that internal and external network.
Yeah, I know my community, and my friends and I were chatting about something this morning, like, oh, okay. And just having that, it's great. So in my observation, Black families aren't always aware or have their children participate in out of school time STEM programs. What are the reasons you think this occurs?
So I think this happens for a number of reasons. First is just not having the information. So just the same way, if you had a doctor in your family, you would know, like, these are the things you take along the medical route. You go to this is what you do to get into residency. This is what you do to go on to other things in the medical profession. If you don't have a scientist that is in your family, it can be hard to start that route, and that's person. And just as a family, you just don't know. So that could be one thing. I will say sometimes there are gatekeepers to information. So you can run into a teacher or guidance counselor or someone who's holding information, but holding it for specific students. So I encourage parents to be involved in their child's school, to be talking with the guidance counselor, talking with the science teacher. I know actually a good number of, and just sometimes the students just don't pay attention to what's being offered, and it can be overwhelming also. So, checking in with your child and saying, I hear this all the time, that the teacher will say, I posted in Google Classroom about all of the opportunities, so you checking in and saying, did you check in and what are the opportunities this summer? I always try to remind people that February to March is when most applications come out for summer programs. If you want your child to be in a summer program, January, February, March are the times to get in there. A lot of programs offer financial aid, so don't let a sticker price get in the way of you signing up your child. If you never know until you ask. And so I think just checking in with the schools for one. The other piece of that is not knowing there are other resources. So again, the Science Center, science museums. If you live near a local university, they have programs. Typically, they are going to have something. So for people who are living in Georgia, Georgia Tech has a whole list of programs that they offer. Georgia State University has a whole list of programs that they offer. Even Morehouse and Spelman do the SMASH Academy. So there are opportunities. We just have to, I think the minute I think we get the information like, hey, these are the places you need to look. I think that's the biggest thing, of not knowing where to look and not knowing where to start and what the cycle is. And so as soon as we get that information and get it consistently out, then I think more people will be a part of those programs.
But you said something really, really important, the gatekeeping that happens. And parents really have to be aware. A lot of gatekeeping I don't like, because they're children and you're making decisions about what children are capable of doing based on stuff they do as their brains are developing. And some of the gatekeepers, they don't realize it's you. In high school, I hated economics. It was awful. My teacher was awful. And I was just like, this is a very bad subject. I went to college. My economics professor was amazing. I ended up minoring in economics, right? So a lot of these gatekeepers will blame children who are still developing for stuff that are actually their flaws, right? Kids are disinterested because of them. Um, and so when we talk about gatekeepers, what are the best ways for families to
Mhm.
get around that to provide experience for their children?
Yeah, I go back to the one, if you feel like somebody's a gatekeeper, making sure you build a relationship with them. Oh, the science teacher's the one that recommends all the kids to go to these schools. Tap into that at the school. Like, who's the person who is sharing out the resources? Who's the person who's giving out the different nominations? Ask them what your child needs to do in order to be a part of that. But the other thing is, again, keeping your own resources, looking around your community, your city, state, and seeing, what is being offered in my state, keeping it running, and what's being offered nationally. Because at the same time, while I am very locally focused, some groups can, federal agencies, NASA, EPA, the National Association, Oceanics, all of those spaces are federal agencies that do some kind of K-12 and outreach. So looking at that, Department of Defense actually has a whole host of K-12, STEM programs that they support. So, being like, you have to keep your own resource set the same way. If your child was into an athletic sport, you would know, like, whether they go to AAU, when's it time for them to try out? If you're trying to do a travel team versus in-school team, you keep all those resources together. This is the same thing. You have to keep the resources for what's in school, what's out of school, what's being offered across all levels. And it's a lot, just to be honest. So spreadsheets might be your best friend. But keeping a mindful understanding of those offerings should hopefully help, especially if you are encountering gatekeepers. You do not necessarily have to keep going through that person. And there are a ton of people who try to keep consolidated offerings for, so in the Bay Area, we have Bay Area Teen Science. That's the website that wonderful people are keeping up to date and going. And they try to collate everything that's happening around the Bay Area in terms of offerings to teens in STEM opportunities.
Yeah, and parent groups. I'm in a couple of them, and they're constantly posting. And I know last month they started a subgroup of this parent Facebook group that I'm in, specifically for summer programs. So,
that's network, social groups.
Yes, yes. So this next question is about systemic things that you and I have occurred in observed in our career. So there are some organizations that host out of school time STEM programs that say they are unable to recruit and or enroll Black youth in their programs. Why do you think those organizations have issues recruiting and or enrolling Black youth in their programs?
I think that goes back to the one, the historical gatekeeping. So we never knew it was offered to us. So why would I go apply to that? Or I only think that these group of kids get to go. So why would I apply? So I think there's a mixture of like a little bit of self-selection out. So especially as young people, if you see something that is new to you or, just doesn't seem like it's welcoming, you might not apply to that program. And so I do think we have that issue there first of like students self-selecting and saying that's not for me. The second thing that we have to talk about is
historic. So do they say it's not for me based on the images of the program, where the program is being hosted, or those things that make students feel this program is not for us?
Yeah, so I was going to say that second piece is the historical. We have not been welcoming. We have not, put up the poster. We have not gone to the schools to recruit. We have not created relationships. We have automatically said, oh, we put up a poster now. Hey guys, here's our program. You should come to us, without building relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other piece. So there is a self-selection piece for students that are like, I don't think this is for me. And it is probably because we have not built relationships with that school district, with that community. We talk about this on our team all the time for Berkeley Lab, of how are we building relationships with communities that have not been historically a part of our internal community. What are the barriers to what happened? Why don't we have communication in certain spaces? And we do a lot of work to say, let me build relationships with organizations. Let me build relationships with school districts. So I've only been in this position for about 5 years. So my first thing was, let me build up trust with our school districts. That's the first thing. Because one, that hopefully captures, at least we get the message out that, hey, we're doing stuff to the entire school districts. The second piece of that is now drilling down and saying, where are the community groups that I need to be building relationships with, and making sure that we have representation from every school group that we possibly can. And then even drilling down more is now, okay, where are the clubs that are getting to specific students that we are missing in our application? And so I think a lot of organizations, especially sometimes when we do outreach, go, I threw up a flyer, I sent out an email, I, made a phone call. That's enough. And it's not enough. We actually need to be intentional about our recruitment efforts, about who we are talking to, about getting teachers on our side. So one thing, I have some great teacher supporters that anytime I say, hey, we have a visit, hey, we have a program, they are like, we will be there. My kids are getting on the bus, we're coming. And these are historically groups that did not get that, invitation or offering. We've been around for 90 plus years. So, over the course of 90 years. So we are trying to correct that. But I think a lot of organizations try to skip past the history, and they want to jump to, well, we're doing it now, without acknowledging the history of the relationship not being there for such a long time. And because of that, also lack of relationship, and also some probably distrust, So, you have to think about, if you're pulling in people, how have you treated your employees? How have you treated people that have been on or part of your organization before?
Those are good points. And people not realizing that it's just not enough to say, oh, I have a STEM program, right? But the importance of getting trust of the communities you want to serve. And especially some organizations not coming in saying, hey, I actually observed this in a program like orientation, open house, and I cringe because the first words out of the organizer's mouth was, when you child participate in this program, it allowed them to have more earning potential than your family has now. There's a whole lot of assumptions in this space, right? And how does that encourage somebody to send their child when you can see they've already made assumptions about your child? And knowing the community that they were talking to, this community had a diverse level of socioeconomic, levels, but because you're coming in not a part of this community, making assumptions about this community, and I was just horrified, okay, why are y'all doing this if you really are making all these assumptions and biases about a community that you say you want to serve, right?
Yeah. Definitely, we talk about that, especially with our mentors, about not making assumptions about people's background, about their experiences. They may have two scientists, who are parents at home, and that may be their experience. And so you should not assume that just because a certain person looks a certain way or comes from a certain background or, gender, race, ethnicity, that there are a number of, oh, we're serving this particular population. I tend to talk about, diversity, equity, inclusion, and any thoughts around that as we're not saving anybody. We are removing barriers that have been put in place by our own institution. And that is mostly, and we are changing our own environments to make them welcoming to all. That is at the baseline. That is what we are doing. So we are not making things, we are making things transparent. So that's why we have an application process for our programs. It's not oh, I met somebody, or my neighbor is this person, or I know somebody higher up, so they let me work here for the summer. We're moving away from that, and we're saying there's an actual process. Here's the process: opens on this day, it closes on this day. So that's one, removing the barrier of gatekeeping, right? Because anybody can apply, and putting up eligibility. That's removing barriers and gatekeeping. We are making sure that everybody knows about it, because again, we want to make sure that again, anybody who sees who's interested can be a part of it. We try to, think about even just how we put up images, how we put together videos, who's represented in those, so that every student can see themselves, hopefully in something that we've put out. That's very intentional. And, a lot of people, I think, again, they think they're going out and changing, like you're changing the person. And it's like, no, we should be changing our institutions to make them more welcoming for the young people, again, who were excluded from these opportunities before.
And I really like that, because there are a lot of organizations that do come with this savior, right? That if we don't offer this for XYZ population, they will be lost. Versus this is an opportunity for both of us, right? Because the reality of it is, especially if these programs are getting federal dollars, you need students to enroll just as much as the students need to take advantage of the opportunity. And so seeing it as a mutual benefit, as a way to say, I don't want to say righting wrongs. That is part of it, but I also think it is, like you said, removing barriers, letting people feel seen, that sense of belonging. Like, you belong in this space. You belong pursuing a STEM career if you're interested, right? And making sure that these programs are a way for children to feel that way. So how can we do in our advertising and our relationship building, shift our own narratives as organizations that provide this work for students, to say it's not about our perception of children and who they are and who we think they are, but it's really about these XYZ things that and I know that prepare kids for college and career in STEM, and focus on that instead of like, we're saving this generation. No, we're diversifying the pipeline for the future STEM workforce through our programming, right?
Yeah. And we're short on that workforce. We don't have enough people to fill the jobs that are coming up. We need more thinkers and different perspectives. If we are going to solve some of the biggest issues around STEM in the next couple of decades, we need as many hands on deck as possible. So it does us no good to put up blockades for anybody when they could be the next person that solves, whatever crisis that we have coming up. So yeah, I'm like, let's make sure that we get as many students in as possible, and just support them.
So what type of organization, I think you may have answered this indirectly through other questions, but maybe just have a focus. What type of organizations host out of school time programs?
Sure. So first of all, there's always, some kind of after school program that's typically hosted by a high school or a group that's coming into a school to do or supplement, STEM programs. So we even will go to, say, an elementary school and help support a STEM night. There's that for young people. I talked about your children's museums, science museums, and science centers. They're all not the same. And they host different activities for different groups and different people and have different focuses. And then from there, you go to your universities and local colleges and community centers. They will also host programs. And finally, you are looking at your federal agencies that are hosting programs, especially if you live near a NASA center or a national lab, or any of local agency that is local to your community or your city. They might have outreach programs as well. So, start with school, go to city, go to your local institutions, and then universities, and then federal.
And so, how do families become aware of these programs? And if there are costs associated with some of these programs, how do families pay for them?
So becoming aware of programs, again, start at school and then look for local organizations that might collate all of this information together. There are plenty of websites that might have this. Universities tend to also host a number of websites that will talk about what's offered. Then on top of that, for paying for cost, programs are expensive. So I try to always, when I put out a list, I am starting to add the ones that cost as well, but I try to start with all of the free ones. So look for the free ones first to start. And there are some great free programs. So because I'm thinking about economic barriers, all of the programs that we host are either free or they are paid opportunities. So the students get paid for learning, for being there. That doesn't happen all the time. And so the next thing is always look into whether the program provides financial aid. Most programs will have something that they do offer for families based on economic status. And then the final thing is, unfortunately, this is kind of like a sacrifice as well, kind of similar to if a student was really great at an athletic sport. If you are willing to pay for, all of the stuff that comes along with being great at those sports, kind of think about this the same way as, you might not get a famous basketball player out of this, but you are going to get a very smart person who's going to be really wonderful at whatever they choose to do in the future if you start to invest in them early.
And I like that thought, reminding people, because families easily think, oh, let me make this investment in this sport. Let me make an investment in this team. But it isn't always the same mindset to support children's academic endeavors beyond just making sure they have school supplies, right? But if your child is interested in the academic program, just know there could be
a cost
associated, like robotics teams, science fair projects, right? That costs money. And so just making sure that as you are some of it is a financial barrier, like some families just don't have it, but some of it is you shifting your priorities as a family, as a community, raising these children and saying, oh, well, we need to do XY dollars to support their academic endeavors and interests and achievement. And my final question is, how do families support their children's participation in these programs?
That's a great one. So one, making sure that you can help them stay on top of what the requirements are for the programs. If they need to have, something paid for, or they need to be somewhere, I think that's, the starting baseline. If they are doing a virtual program, trying to make sure that they have a quiet space that they can fully focus. If they're doing an in-person program, checking in with them about how they're getting there on time, how they're showing up, do they have everything that they need? And then again, cheering for them just as loud as you would at, a basketball game or some other thing. So for us, we tend to, have a beginning orientation with parents and students, and we have a final symposium and presentation day. We invite all the parents to come in and see what they've been doing for their entire time. So that definitely showing up, listening to them, even if you don't understand, because you might not understand what they did that summer. They could be working with some microbiologists that's, discovering new plant cells or, something of that nature. And you might not understand it, but being there and cheering for them, and encouraging them, to keep pursuing what they're doing. I think that's the best way to support a student. Again, there might get to be a point because you've invested so much that they're at this point where they are talking in, another language that you don't understand, but having that support from you that does not also make them feel awkward about, going into stuff that you don't have experience with. And this is what we're talking about. They might be the first to go into this area. So supporting them and helping them, feel confident in being the first in the family, maybe to go on to pursue a STEM career, or continuing the legacy if you are already in it, but you chose, chemistry and they're over here in physics and astrophysics, again, helping and supporting them in that way. And even I think a lot of times, there might be that imposter syndrome or I don't belong. So checking in with them, especially if they are in a space where they might be the only one that looks like them, and checking in on how they are doing, and following up and providing them with additional support systems of, how are you feeling about, the content? Do you feel like people are supporting you? We are very fortunate for our programs to have like a 1 to like 3 ratio at some points in time, which is unheard of, I think, in a lot of spaces. And so we try as much as possible to check in with every student, especially if we're doing something like learning how to code or teaching quantum, mechanics. And students get to interact a lot with other adults to support them. But if, say, a program is just like a 1 to 10 ratio, that person does not have time to check in with every single student all the time. So making sure that you're at least getting a debrief and helping understand and having those conversations with them of like, I know you're in a new space. What does that feel like? How are you coping? What can we do to support you? Those are real conversations that you might want to have with them, especially if they're doing something that you've never done before, and you've never experienced.
I really like that idea of checking in because it can be a new space, a new environment. And as you know, as they further progress in research, they may be doing something groundbreaking, right? And so being able to start at an early age, teaching kids how to adjust, find support with experiencing things that are new, right? That are unknown, is a great point that you're bringing up on how we can support our children, even if it's something that we don't know ourselves, right? It's just like, I've been in plenty, even high school science fairs. I'm like, I don't know what this child is talking about. They are brilliant, and I'm going to make sure they feel brilliant and not bring my own issues of what this baby is talking about. Like, I'm like, you're the expert in this. Great job, great job. So just finding a way to not let our own fears, insecurities, inadequacies on the child, right? Just support them, whether we understand, we like it ourselves or not, but just creating an environment for them to thrive and explore their interests. So my last thought is any closing words of advice, words of wisdom that you have for families to either just in general, help support their child that is interested in STEM, or specific to the out of school time learning, that how that happens and what we can do to support the children in our lives.
I will say closing thoughts. One, organize, 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 use those resources, use those groups, keep those documents together and, knowing and finding out the cycle, stay engaged with the local, your school counselors, your science teachers, math teachers about opportunities if you want students to go into that. And again, like I said, don't, support your child in whatever endeavor they're going into. Try to be their biggest cheerleader. And even if you are scared or you don't know what might happen, hopefully you can build up, their confidence as they're moving forward, and making sure that they are, from a self-esteem perspective, protected and supported and, hyped up a little even when they're walking through the door, so that whatever happens, they know that they have a support system there. Because also I like to say that there's a difference between something being not for you and just hard.
Mhm.
So oftentimes, especially for young people, we can get to something that's hard, or adults, we get to something that's hard and we give up because it's hard instead of asking for help. But I also like to pull in the other thing about these experiences, that students also get to say, I tried, I put my best foot forward, and this is not for me.
Mhm.
And also accepting that answer too, and supporting a child through that process of saying, I don't like this. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I want to go try something else now. And that is something that I feel like, especially for Black families, we don't always get to give to our children, the opportunity to try and then go try something else.
Mhm.
So if you can afford to, put them in things to allow them to really get to try, I think that also gets them a step closer to finding out what their actual passion is. So these opportunities are not just to get the next Nobel Prize winner, but they are also to help a young person find out who they are, what they love, and what they want to do in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a great, great conversation. I appreciate all the nuggets that you shared, and I am going to give an opportunity for those who are present in the call to ask any questions that they may have.